We are live on abcnews.com and Yahoo News for a special segment called Newsmakers, a special live event. I'm Christiane Amanpour here in Austin with the Texas Governor, Rick Perry. Thank you for joining us.
Christiane, it's an honor to have you in Texas.
It's great to be here. And let me ask you first, when precisely did you know that you wanted to be President of the United States?
Well, precisely, I'm not sure I can put a finger on, but the summer of this year, I'm going to say June, late June would be about as close as I could get to saying that the decision was made both in my heart and my mind and my family.
Well, now we're well into the campaign. The first major contests are coming up in under 2 months. Let me ask you about another campaign that's rather beleaguered. Herman Cain has had many allegations against him right now. If they were proven true, do you believe that something as serious as sexual harassment should be serious enough or would be to disqualify a candidate from the presidency?
I think trying to make theoretical calls about issues that are dogging a particular campaign is not of great interest to me.
Just asking your opinion on that.
Right, and I'm giving you my opinion that I don't have an interest in getting off of my message on how we create jobs in this country. A lot of allegations and he said, she said.
Do you think they've been answered well?
Again, I've been focused on my business and haven't paid a lot of attention. And I'm sure that campaign will appropriately address them. I'm very focused on my campaign and how we talk to Americans about getting this country back to work. It's the reason I laid a plan out 2 weeks ago to cut and to balance and to grow this economy.
On those issues, we have obviously asked a lot of people who go to abcnews.com and Yahoo News to ask for their questions that they might put towards candidates. And a lot of them, of course, came up with the issue of taxes. Let me read you a question. One man wonders, quote, with the majority of Americans in favor of additional taxes for the rich, why is the Republican Party opposed? And Governor, roughly 75% of Americans believe that the rich should pay higher taxes to help pay down the debt. Do you not think you're out of touch with the American people if you're opposed to that?
As the governor of the state that's created more jobs than any other state in the last decades, as a matter of fact, 40% of all the jobs created in this country since June of 2009 have been in my home state. I know a thing or two about how you entice entrepreneurs into putting their capital into play and creating jobs. And that's very, very important. And one of the ways that we did it was make sure that we don't overtax those job creators out there. So the idea that some would want to get in the business of dividing Americans, pitting this group against that group, I'm just not going to engage in that. What I'm all about is the environment where entrepreneurs are comfortable that they can risk their capital, have a return on their investment. That's how jobs are created. That's how we've done it in the state of Texas, and I'll suggest to you it will work for this country. So focusing upon the environment that's created for job creation is what the President of the United States should be doing rather than dividing this country.
We'll talk a little bit about what you're talking about, divisions, in a moment. But first, you concede that your flat tax would bring in less revenue than the current tax code. And you have basically said that you're proposing that some way to bridge that gap would be to do a lot of budget cuts. Given the fact that new figures are coming out practically daily on the level of poverty in this country, it's something like 16% live in extreme poverty, the disparity of income. How will you ensure with all these cuts that those who need the help the most, those who need the government programs the most, will not be left out in the cold?
Well, safety nets are important, but the best safety net for an American is have access to a job. And again, that goes right back to our focus upon making sure that we put policies in place, tax policy, regulatory policy in particular, that entices, if you will, gives incentives to the job creators to create jobs. I don't think there's anyone, or I haven't met many people that run up to me and say, gee, we want a government to take care of us from cradle to the grave. Most people really understand government is in the way, both tax-wise and regulatory-wise, from the standpoint of how we get this country back working again. And people want the dignity to be able to take care of their family with a job. And that's what we're focused on.
One of the ways to get jobs, most people say, is by being more and more educated. At least that stands you in much better stead. And obviously you have cut quite a lot from the education budget, some $4 billion, even though 80,000 more people are coming into the school system. How do you square the need for education with the massive cuts in the education budget?
Well, over the course of the decade that I've been the governor of Texas, we have increased our spending by substantial amounts.
But Texas is still very close to the bottom when it comes to education in the country.
Well, it depends on how you want to look at that. Our 4th and 8th grade African American and Hispanic in math are some of the highest in the country. So, you know, people will pick and choose. We're putting more of our young people into college. We're giving them more opportunities. We're expanding our grant programs where young people who might not 5 years ago thought they had a chance to have an opportunity to go to college, they're being able to have that opportunity. So Texas is actually making, I would suggest, as good a progress or better than any state in the nation from the standpoint.
Are you satisfied with it?
You're never satisfied with it. You always want more kids in college, more of them doing well. But we've made great progress in the decade since I've been the governor. But the issue that you talk about is making sure that we have those opportunities and making sure that that's a value. And in the state of Texas, I do think that we have good value from the standpoint of what it costs to go to our universities. Can it be better? Absolutely. And we should always be looking for those ways to make it better, more affordable, and more accessible.
One of the issues that is on many Americans' minds from all the questions we've had from our online community is about the paralysis, the gridlock, the partisanship in Washington. And you have talked about coming to Washington, quote, with, if you're looking for someone who's kumbaya, I'm not your guy, I'm coming with a wrecking ball. Many people sent us questions worrying about the tone of government right now. One asks, I've never seen the country so divided in my lifetime. The divide is becoming vitriolic and hateful. What will you, they ask, do to unite an increasingly divided America?
And what I mean by the wrecking ball, I'm talking about the taxes, I'm talking about the regulations. I've dealt with Democrats and Republicans in the last decade and passed some very sweeping and big legislation here in the state of Texas, including tort reform, where we required Democrats to come over and vote with us to put it on a constitutional amendment election, and we did that. It passed. So the idea that I don't know how to work with my friends on the other side of the aisle is just incorrect.
Do you think that's what's required in Washington?
I think it would be very helpful if we have a president of the United States that is not about dividing this country. And I think President Obama is about dividing this country with, frankly, no thought about what it does to the future of this country.
Can you name a single Democrat on Capitol Hill that you could work with, who you have worked with, perhaps?
You know, I think there are a number of Democrats that we would sit and work with. I mean, I can sit down and talk to Joe Biden. I think Joe Biden gets it. I think he's probably a loyal vice president, but I think he understands that you cannot take this country forward by increasing taxes. You cannot take this country forward with passing pieces of legislation like Dodd-Frank that strangles our small community banks. You cannot take this country forward, frankly, with Obamacare that we know is going to bankrupt the states, and at the end of the day, access to health care is going to be worse. I get it about, you know, this was a president who came into office with great expectations. His policies have failed. They have failed miserably. His foreign policy has failed miserably. And I think there are a lot of Democrats. He can't even get enough votes in the Senate to pass his jobs bill today. I think that gives you an idea. This isn't about Democrat versus Republican. This is about ideas. This president's ideas are bankrupt.
You've seen, obviously, so many people talk about obstructionism in Congress, and that's why we're getting so many questions about how you can unlock that. But I want to move on to national security. As president, would you reinstate Don't Ask, Don't Tell, even if commanders, as they have done, have said that openly serving gays and lesbians have not made any difference to operational security or any kind of morale?
Yeah, I think you go back and sit down with your commanders in the field and have that conversation. I think don't ask, don't tell worked very well. And
so you would reinstate it?
I think it worked very well. I think the idea that the President of the United States wanted to make a political statement using our men and women in the military as the tool for that was irresponsible.
Do you think it was a political statement?
Absolutely.
You know, so many allied governments, whether it's Israel, whether it's England or France, have done that, and they say they have strengthened their armed forces. And you remember during the Iraq War, there was so many gay people who couldn't serve in desperately needed positions, and that harmed national security. You would really reinstate it?
I don't necessarily agree with your premise. What I agree with is that the President of the United States changing a policy that was working well, and to do it while we were at war in two different theaters, I think was irresponsible, and I truly believe that he did it to respond to his political base.
You were in the Air Force. Would you have been uncomfortable serving with openly gay members of the Air Force?
I don't ask that question, and I think that's the issue right there. If an individual in their private life makes a decision about their sexuality from the standpoint of how they're going to practice it, that's their business. I don't think that question needs to be asked. That's the reason don't ask, don't tell was, in fact, a workable policy, and that's where I would be comfortable with our country going back to that.
Let me turn to another issue of national security. More news is coming out this week, right now, about Iran's nuclear capability. You indicated that you would support an Israeli strike on Iran's nuclear operations. Would you support, as president, a preemptive American strike on Iran's nuclear facilities?
Well, here's where we find ourselves, with two really bad positions. We're either going to allow this madman to become in control of a nuclear device, or we're going to have a nuclear strike, or excuse me, a military strike to keep that from occurring, either the Israelis unilaterally or in a bilateral or multilateral way with their allies.
What about a unilateral American preemptive strike?
I never would take a military option off the table when it comes to dealing with this individual.
What would you precisely do? I push you because both President Bush and President Obama have had obviously major frustrations with Iran.
Right.
Despite sanctions, despite all the diplomacy they have rallied, this program continues. What would you do differently than either of those presidents?
Well, in 2009, I would have done a substantial amount differently than what this president did, from the standpoint of he was naively having conversations with the Syrians and the Iranians rather than using both diplomatic and economic and overt, covert, or even civic opportunities to overthrow this oppressive regime. He missed a great opportunity.
So you think the U.S. should overthrow the regime?
I think the United States needed to be actively involved in taking that oppressive regime out of control of Iran. We had an opportunity, we missed it.
Do you believe, just before you announced your candidacy, you held a big evangelical prayer meeting. Would you do that kind of thing as president? And do you believe that there is either too much or not enough religion in American government and public life today?
Well, I'd suggest to you that I can no more remove myself from my faith than I can remove myself from the fact that I grew up in Paint Creek, Texas, the son of two tenant farmers.
So you would?
It is part of my life. And how I live my life is a reflection of my faith. I don't have a problem in the world of exhibiting my faith, just as I don't have a problem in the world with you exhibiting your faith. That is one of the great things that our founding fathers created, a country where people were free to express their opinions and to also practice their faith.
So we're about out of time, but we want to ask you a couple of quick, what we call lightning round questions, because this is for a slightly different audience than a normal political interview. It's going online. So, very quickly, sort of one-word answers. Worst job you ever had?
Oh, gee. I think that was building fence with a jackhammer.
When was that?
Oh, it was back in the mid-1970s.
TV guilty pleasure.
I don't have one. I'm not much of a TV person.
Favorite junk food?
Vienna sausage and crackers.
Oh my goodness. Happiest you've ever been apart from your marriage or the birth of your children?
Oh, gee whiz. There's nothing that gets close to those two. So the happiest I will be is when, as my son has found the perfect mate in his life, when my daughter finds her perfect mate.
What do you think is your personal theme song?
Oh my goodness. It'd have to be something that Beethoven wrote.
Beethoven. It's good. And name the 5th president who you think should be on Mount Rushmore.
I think there's enough presidents on Mount Rushmore already.
Governor Perry, thank you very much indeed. And we want to thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
And to say to our audience that if you missed any part of the live streaming of this interview, you can turn at any time to abcnews.com and to Yahoo News to catch it whenever you like. I'm Christiane Amanpour. Thank you very much for joining us, Governor.
My honor. Thank you.